And thank you for joining us for this General Policy Committee for the City of Gainesville for Thursday, September 11th, 2025. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, we're on to the adoption of the agenda.
But before we adopt the agenda, I do want to, some of you just heard this, but I want to make sure that we're all aware and take a moment to recognize our birthday lady for the day. Andrea Wyatt is having a significant birthday. Anybody want to join in on the...
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Andrea. Happy birthday to you, and many more.
See, and that's what you get for letting people know it's your birthday.
How about you move adoption?
So we have a motion and
Second.
a motion and a second. Is there any?
I have no comment,
Very
Mr.
good.
Mayor.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously with Commissioners Chestnut and Dr. Walker absent.
Mr. Mayor, we're on to the approval of the minutes with the recommendation that General Policy Committee approve the minutes from the August 28th, 2025 meeting.
Move adoption of the minutes from August 28th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the minutes as printed and distributed. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, our first discussion item for the afternoon, 2025-651, Commissioner Eastman Safe Streets and Fencing Standards, with the recommendation the General Policy Committee directs staff to prepare draft updates to the city's fencing ordinance and return with a draft ordinance. The update should establish a maximum height of 4 feet for fences located in front yards and a maximum height of 8 feet for fences located in rear yards, consistent with the standards in other Florida cities, and include any additional changes staff identifies as useful or necessary for effective implementation.
All right, great.
Very good. Commissioner Eastman, you want to walk us through this?
I would love to. So yes, so just to jump off here, as we know, our policy structure that we had from before, in which previously what we would do is we'd come up with an idea, we'd send it through kind of a review of through our clerk's office for staff. During our budget cuts, we removed that process, and so this is just my way of trying to continue to move policy forward. This is an issue that NICE actually has gone through the policy process previously, so you have that in backup, I think, from 2022, and something that me and Commissioner Book talked about. I think when we first got in, we had a sunshine meeting and discussed this as something that we would like to do. And really the point here is just looking at other cities. What are the standards that they have for their fencing standards? How do we make sure that our cities are walkable, that there's eyes on the street, that we're following good SEPTED practices, that we are making sure that we're moving forward with best practices from other communities in terms of for fences. So I'll kind of jump into why I think this is an important topic of conversation. I think most folks might think it's just fences. But I think that they have a huge impact on everything. This is for SEPTED, and I can defer to Commissioner Ed Book, who is an expert in SEPTED practices, who can correct me on anything. But one of the key concepts of SEPTED is that this is called crime prevention through environmental design. And the basic idea is that it's important that you, of course, have a robust police department, that you continue to enforce all of your laws, but that you need to design cities in a safe way. And crime prevention through environmental design are the tactics that you can use within a city. And one of the most important ones is having eyes on the street, people being able to see outside of their businesses, outside of their houses, so that if there's anything going on the street, they'd be able to correct those things, or they'd be able to call the police department when that comes up. And it's frequently throughout this. These are quotes directly from the Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design Guidebook. Design visibility in the built environment means allowing for clear sight lines, talks about natural surveillance, and then explicit, sight lines, any walls, berms, bushes, power boxes, or solid fences that block the view should be eliminated or modified. And then Vision Zero, fences have a huge impact on that. You need, as you're coming up to any kind of cross area or where there's two streets coming, the ability for cars to see cyclists or other cars coming forward or pedestrians coming forward is really critically important. We do have sightline standards within our code that just for the one section where the car might be coming up right to there. But making sure that we have fences that are low enough that you're able to see over that is very important for our Vision Zero standards. And then just overall walkability. You have these tall 8-foot fences that can go along within our neighborhoods, within our communities, and it really just hurts the overall look and feel of the community. This is from Jeff Speck from his book Walkable Cities. That basically walkability is just as much about the feeling that you're walking through a city as it is about the safety of walking through a city. I'll go more into this, but this is actually the fence that made me want to bring this forward. This is right in our downtown. It's formerly called the Beach. It is about a half of a city block. That is just one solid wooden fence all along South Main as you're coming forward. And this isn't the only one that is like this in the city, but it is one that I think is a particularly egregious example of folks who, it makes sense for the business owner. I met with the business owner here from the Beach. He had, I think, a very good reason why he wanted to put a fence up there. But the purpose of our codes and for our ordinances is that what might make sense for an individual business owner might make sense for an individual residential person. When you put it all together throughout a city, it can really hurt the overall livability and the safety of that city.
Ennui is a word we don't use nearly often enough.
Yeah, that's I didn't read it entirely, but yeah, you must not be bored by blank walls or parking lots, which will cause you to turn around from sheer ennui. It was in the new Inside Out movie though. That was a new character in there. And then you got this is a quote from Jane Jacobs, who really started a lot of the core concepts from SEPTED and a lot of the urbanist principles. And she's just talking about here, this is the second chapter, the first real thing where she's going in of the death and life of great American cities, the importance of safety within cities, and really the importance of making sure that there are eyes upon the street, that there are people who can see outside of businesses, and that your active uses of businesses are pointed toward the street. And we have this all throughout our code. So these are some of the design guidelines that we have in our code. We have things like street frontages. This is all in the street frontage portion. It says there's glazing requirements where you are required to have glass that will look out onto the street. You have requirements that says the ground floor along street frontages must contain active uses that are oriented toward the street. And so these are all with that idea in mind that we need to make sure that people are using buildings that are along particularly our main commercial corridors, but just in the city in general, and that it's looking out toward the area and that there can be eyes out on the street. And of course we have, so it seems to me like our fence ordinance, which I'll go into what exactly our fence ordinance says, is almost kind of a loophole in this whole thing. While we are requiring folks to be able to, that we're requiring new businesses to be able to look out on the street, that we have good SEPTED principles in there. There's no law against building, what you see here at the Beach or what you see up here in Grove Street, where you're able to put 8-foot tall, non-see-throughable fences, across areas. So I'll just jump into the actual fence rules. And this is just the whole ordinance in its entirety. We're not incredibly focused on Section A, but I'll just discuss it, which is more about, the quality of the grade of the fences, what kind of material they can be made out of. We're fairly loose on those restrictions. There's some cities like St. Pete that have that are much more restrictive as to, opacity on fences, what kind of materials they can be made out of. I'm not proposing anything that updates that. Really what this is about is just the height of fences. And so right now, you are allowed to, within the city of Gainesville, build an 8-foot fence anywhere along any property within the city, so long as it's within the setback. If you're outside of the setback, you can build it all the way up to the height of the building. So you can build a 2-3 story tall fence, which is unlikely to happen, but is possible to do under our codes. We don't allow this within our historic districts, so places like Duck Pond, Pleasant Street, University Heights North and South. The height is 3 feet tall, so long if it's non-see-throughable, so with 50% or more opaque. 4 feet tall, so if you're making it so that it's 50% or more transparent. Then you have a number of other kind of aesthetic requirements that they put within there. So these are the current set of rules. You have 8-foot setbacks across your entire area. It could be as tall as the building beyond that. So what I'm proposing is to really match what you see other cities for best practices, which is 4 foot in the front yard, and then just keep the rest of it the same. So basically, we will, same standards apply across the board, but within the front yard where you really want eyes on the street, where you really want that out there, just bring that down to 4 feet. And so within your backup, that was put together by staff in 2022, they have about 17 different cities where they go through each one of their how they structure their fence ordinances. And basically it seems like, and all of them are a little different, but the plurality and the bulk of them seem to kind of fit around the same one. That is 4-foot fence in the front yard, either 6 foot or 8 foot in the rear yard. Since we've allowed 8-foot fences in the city of Gainesville for as far back as I can think of, I don't feel like, regulating that below that amount. The difference between a 6-foot and 8-foot fence, most people can't see over it regardless. So I don't think it's that. It doesn't make that much of a change. What's that?
Oh, some people.
Well, yeah. I am 5 foot. I'm 5'8", so I cannot see over it. I should say that. We could certainly have a conversation, but my recommendation is just to adopt what I'm seeing a lot of other cities do, which is a 4-foot front yard fence. Keep the exact standards in the rear yard exactly as they are now. And so I'm happy to answer any questions or if staff has any feedback on this. But the motion that I have is trying to give as much direction to staff as possible. This is where we would like to go while still allowing them to tweak the ordinance that comes back in case there's any kind of policy changes or anything else. So it's that the city commission directs staff to prepare the draft updates to the city's fencing ordinance, turn to the commission with recommendations. The update should establish a maximum height of 4 feet for fences located in front yards and establish a maximum height of 8 feet for fences located in rear yards, consistent with standards adopted by peer cities in Florida, and include any other changes staff deems necessary for implementation.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Eastman. Commissioner Willets.
So for city staff, I was unclear from this. What constitutes a rear yard? At what point along the side of a building does rear start? Is it at the front corner, the middle, the back? Just so that I understand. So I know some people need 8 feet to keep a large dog in. So is it that they can have from the front corner and back, or is it mid, or where does in our code? I know we have like side setbacks, but that's the entire side. So where does a rear yard start?
Okay, staff can answer that. I don't know if there's no distinction between front and rear yards, at least according for fences. There might be in other parts of the code. Other cities have a clear distinction between front and rear yards, and I imagine that you would adopt the definition of these other cities that have done that. But I don't know if we have anything else in code.
So maybe that definition is in fence stuff. So we would adopt that definition perhaps in this.
Yeah, I would imagine unless it's written in code elsewhere. Okay, it is.
Is what?
Welcome, Mr. Parsons.
Thank you. Just quicker on the draw with the muni code. We do have a definition of rear yard. It is means the area between the rear lot line and the minimum required rear yard setback. This is clear as mud, right? Yeah. So we do have a definition. Typically, that's what your code says already. You have a definition for front yard, rear yard, and side yard.
So side yard is. So my question is that we need to. Because this sounds like you couldn't have an 8-foot fence starting, let's say, midway back. Let's say on a long house, you would have to do 4 feet there. If let's say midway back, as opposed to all the way at the back corner.
Typically, it's outside. It would be the rear of whatever principal structure would be denoting where the rear yard would begin. We can, this is just a direction on the height, so we can bring that information back to the commission when it comes back as an ordinance.
So I feel like that's for some people that's making a very small fenced yard if they need to be able to have a particularly large dog. Large dog can jump 4 feet. So I feel like in those other codes, figure out exactly where it seems a little restrictive to not be able to have a fence that goes kind of midway. That's pretty common, is that about half the way the depth of the house is where people have a back fence. But if the front of that would then need to be 4 until some other point. So, but otherwise, and then my other question to staff, maybe, what's the difference between like a fence and a wall for like a walled courtyard? And that maybe not in residential areas, but more mixed use or commercial.
Typically, I think the section of code I think that's referenced here has a definition for fence and has a definition for wall, and they are separate definitions. Typically, when we say wall, it's a masonry structure versus a fence, which could be multiple different materials. And I'm happy to stand down and let staff, who's probably much more familiar with the code, speak for this.
And I just kind of question, is it that if someone wanted to still have something that looks like a walled courtyard, it would need to be masonry, or would they still have to would it still trigger something about wanting to have eyes on the street through kind of a septet idea that?
In terms of probably what I think with what you're getting at, I think staff would probably see those things as interchangeable, particularly if they were anywhere, within that, the required setback, which currently we limit, fence heights, to, within the setback. So we would, whether it was a wall, masonry wall, or, in terms of like a garden wall or something like that versus a fence. I mean, those would be, I think staff would see those as interchangeable. If it was something that was integral to the building per se, like something that was actually like a wall, supporting wall of the building, then it wouldn't constitute a fence in that case. It would just be part of the principal structure.
Okay, well, I'm interested in kind of where that fits in. Not that we have a bunch of downtown courtyarded restaurant, but like in New Orleans, they have that where, you kind of walk down a partial alley and you have a
Right, exactly.
a courtyard dining area.
Right.
And so and then how does this work with, not that we have a lot, but we do have the ability for some lots to face alleys, correct?
Say that again.
Do we have the ability in code for some parcels, residential parcels, to face an alley, not a street? And then what is considered front and back if it only faces like an ADU, like very small, something that faces an alley and not a street?
I see. Well, for purposes of something like an accessory dwelling unit, it has to meet accessory structure setbacks. It would be somewhat independent, I think, of fencing in this case. We do allow for creation of lots off of public or private streets, and then the commission also approved allowing it off of common open space, green space. That's probably where things get a little bit funky, where you're really kind of, you're not dealing with a typical 50 by 100 foot lot on a street, where it may not be as cut and dry.
Or even like a flag lot where...
Something like that.
Exactly. I'm imagining a flag lot and telling someone who's already 100 feet off the road
Right.
that they can't have an 8-foot fence because their eyes need to be on what? That the
Right.
road that's 100 feet away down a little strip of land. So I'm interested in how that can fit into some of our less than standard lot, situations.
I think typically where we do run into some flexibilities when we have like a double frontage lot. We have some of those like corner lots where you have, literally, especially in some of the more like core neighborhoods that we have in the city where there are like small lots, small streets, and a side yard with that fence that faces another street can feel to the property owner oftentimes like it is sort of still their front yard, particularly if it's you have a 5-foot sidewalk and then the property line is right there on the other side of the sidewalk. So but I think we can address all of that and bring those things back to you.
And then just what's the difference between a fence and like walls that screen HVAC or electrical equipment? Particularly I'm thinking of, we have a wall out here in front of the old library building that I think is more than 4 feet, somewhere between 4 and 5. But it's blocking, I think, HVAC equipment or electrical.
Yeah.
Is that separate than fences?
We do have screening requirements, and that can be walls, or they can be landscaping. I'll probably defer to staff on that one and see if they have a better answer than that.
Okay, I just want to see how that kind of fits in. Otherwise, this kind of makes sense to not have large fences right up against the sidewalk where people can't see through. And one of those pictures it was as of 11 or 12:45 today. The fence down on Main and 4th place, 3rd place, whatever it's called, it's taken down.
Oh,
Yeah, as of 12:45 when I drove by. So
mission accomplished.
the poster's still there. The poster's still there. So no, this seems like a decent idea to start looking at. Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Riddle.
So, thank you, Forrest Edelton, Director of the Department of Sustainable Development. So I'm glad to hear that. I think you're speaking of the property on Main Street from this morning. The pictures from the presentation. That's good news to hear because the fence was up earlier this morning. But so it is in violation of our current code. And it was adjudicated guilty this morning at a special magistrate hearing that required the fence to be taken down. So there are a couple more sections of code where fencing and walls and masonry walls can come into play here. I think some of the concerns that were addressed, some of them are at least attempt to be addressed in our Transect code.
Right.
And so permanent fencing is not allowed in the frontage zones for the Transect codes or for the Transect zones. Unfortunately, this property did erect a fence and it was in violation of code, but we moved through the process for that. There was a picture of another property. I am not familiar with that particular property and if it is a code case or not, but it's certainly something that we'll check out as staff.
Will you scoot back to the other
Yeah.
one? I was curious about that one too.
I don't like pointing out by name exact business owners,
No,
though it's pretty, I mean, the sign's in the picture, but.
It's on 10th Avenue.
Yeah. And this is across the board. I mean, I will say that and just to be it's completely transparent here, I mean, a lot of what this will impact is residential properties. And so, I include commercial properties. That was the original intent as I was looking at it, but I see that when you look at other cities across the state, they don't have, I mean, they might have specific, downtown design standards, things like that, but most all of them have some kind of fencing in the front yard regulation that allows people to that you don't have these very tall fences in your front yard. And so it shifted from talking about this purely as commercial to just to have an across the board fence regulation, because it does seem like that looks like that's standard across the board. Though I think you actually worked on the 2022. I see your name in the back of the so I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner.
Not to
Mr.
jump
Mayor.
into Commissioner Willitz's points.
You're good, never. Go ahead. Yes.
So, yes, thank you. Staff has looked at this in the past, and there was the report from staff back in July 2022, and there were recommendations, I think, for what some next steps for, a policy for fencing could look like. And I think that those are still valid recommendations that staff can move forward with. I do think, to speak to the earlier conversation about how this is, to some extent, how this would be applied to residential properties. As Mr. Person said, we do have definitions that we operate by today, front yard, rear yard, side yard, but that would be something that we would certainly want to make sure is very clear for staff to be able to operationalize in whatever that looks like. Something we would also need to make sure that we look like and bring back to you all with your, if that is what you request, is how do we operationalize this? For residential properties today, fences and privacy fences are largely unpermitted. So this could possibly create a need for a new system to sort of review things that are not currently reviewed, other than if they become code enforcement violations that are typically called in by our neighbors or concerned citizens. To that end, also something for your consideration, when and if they are code enforcement violations, and we are called to look at these, of course, then when our officers respond, we look at an area. And so there may be cases where we are going into an area based off of a code violation complaint, and now we are looking at a broader area and neighborhoods for something that is currently not permitted, not required to be permitted.
Commissioner Engel.
Yeah, a couple questions. So those fencing requirements, again, would only be in the setback? So say you had a large piece of property, you wanted to fence off like a private little area somewhere internal to it, that'd be okay, right?
I would want to make sure that I was very clear with the code language. But today, the way that I have applied it in my past and the way that I recall it is that 8-foot requirement is at the property line.
Okay.
And now, as Commissioner Eastman, I think, spoke to, if you move beyond that property line, the limitation is the height of the structure.
Well, I guess it was more a question for Commissioner Eastman, like the intent would be for the edges of the property. So again, like if you had a restaurant and you wanted to fence off a little back patio area, if it was well within inside the property, that would still be okay
Yeah, and if it was a back patio, it wouldn't have much of an impact because the 8-foot requirement would be in there. I see it's possible that you could direct staff to come back. I mean, I see some other codes of ordinances will have you're allowed to have it in the front so long as it's a 50% opacity in the front, or I think Orlando calls them SEPTED certified fences. I think there's ways that you might be able to grant some flexibility there. But yeah, I mean, broadly yes. That's the case.
And then I guess my other question would be like for security purposes, if you had some business that particularly would be looking at, I don't know, like a tow lot or a lay down yard for supply houses, things like that, that normally have more security concerns, is there some variance for that where you can have a higher chain link fence?
So today, currently, for those types of uses, they're typically in our land use or zoning districts that allow fencing to that effect.
And that is something we could work into this as well. All right. That's all I had.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Engel. Commissioner Chestnut.
So, sorry, I came in the middle of this. Now, what is the public purpose here, and what is the problem?
I can go to the front, but basically, well, there's in order to follow crime prevention through environmental design concepts, which are making sure that there's visibility from the street, that people can see if there are any issues going on outside of their house, so that people can call the police department when things come up, and just to have natural surveillance that this is generally a best practice within the crime prevention through environmental design ideas. For Vision Zero, so that as cars are coming forward, if there's another car coming from a different direction, just having slightly lower fences, at least in the front yard, would be able to you'd have better visibility of that. We have sight lines within there, but this would just improve that a bit. But then mostly this is just more.
So have citizens identified this as a problem?
I've had citizens talk about it.
Okay, well, I haven't heard them. I want to go back to that one on 10th Avenue, that business. So you would excuse that business, you're going to excuse that, but then you're saying that would stay in?
No, I put these as.
That is a new fence.
That is a new fence, and yes, I think that these are bad. These are examples of why I think it's important that we bring this forward.
Okay, my concern here is that I haven't heard this as a public problem. I honestly have not. But that if they become a code violation, then that is an economic impact to the citizens. And it escalates. And so I think we have more pressing problems, in my opinion, than having people remove fences that they have in their yard or to cut them down. I would certainly like to hear from some of our advisory committees on this issue before we pass this on to citizens. It seems to me that a couple of referrals would be in keeping. The crime prevention neighborhoods, let's hear what they have to say. Let's hear what the black on black crime has to say. And then let's hear what the historic district has to say about it. That's what I would include. But I don't see imposing this on citizens at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chestnut. Commissioner Book.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Commissioner Eastman, every time I hear the term crime prevention through environmental design, it does get me very excited, right? That's a fact, because it's something that I teach, and we just want to make sure we use it in intended ways, so I appreciate you bringing it up. And for it, I actually just had the same question. I wasn't sure, did this come up from a community group or an organization, or was staff driving this? Because I had heard nothing related to, citywide concern with fencing. So that's really, do you have any insight there?
Well, yeah, so first, I do think that it's important. We are legislators, and so I hear from the community. We bring forward policies that we would like to change, and so I brought this forward. I've heard about it from the community, but I was looking at other cities, looking at best practices through other cities. I think that's an important design characteristic, and so I'm bringing it forward. But yes, it's something that we've certainly heard from folks within the community. I hear it from certain neighbors. And so, yes. If you're asking where it's driven from, I put it on the agenda, and I think it's something we should talk about.
Fair enough. Much of our stuff is driven in two ways. It's typically a community effort, community initiative, something that's been addressed because we identified a problem, and you kind of alluded to that. Or sometimes staff says, there's something that's not congruent or not consistent with code and ordinance and statute, and we need to clean that up. And so that always concerns me. But so SEPTED is interesting. Basically, it's an acronym that says make things as open and welcoming as possible. So that's the basic premise. But it's complementary to target hardening. And target hardening is things where, like Commissioner Engel alluded to, where there are other specific uses that you must do. You must protect, for example, against animals, pools. You may want to protect people from knowing that there's youth inside an area. In the case of a hard fence on a sidewalk or a commercial corridor, you would want to protect against environmental hazards like wind and noise, and acoustics. So things like that is where SEPTED and target hardening are complementary, but they don't lead to one use fits all. And so I do appreciate that we had the open public meeting together. And I don't think we talked about fences in particular, but I probably would not apply a fence standard across commercial corridors and basically across the city without us getting substantial input that said, sure, let's do that, because I think we already have a comprehensive plan. We have ordinances. Director Edelton said we would need a new system, and I don't want a new system where we have some significant other things, and sometimes target hardening. A hard fence, a fence you can't see through, a fence that's taller, actually does its intended purpose and actually solves the problem of safety. So all fences should not be visible, whether on commercial corridors or not. That's just kind of a couple of thoughts. I looked at the 2022. I went through, it's really great when we had these policy fellows. Typically they were students. This particular research analysis in 2022, the focus was on residential best practices. It wasn't talking about commercial corridors at all. It said analyze the height requirements for residential fences. So I was careful when I was looking at the 17 cities analyzed to see that 8 of them only talked about residential standards. They weren't. So I don't want to mix and match like one of the slides has like those 4 cities to the right. Mostly those are all residential height requirements. So I do appreciate you making that distinction. But this policy objective was actually residential as opposed to commercial corridor. So I do support SEPTED. You do have to make sure that we apply it in ways that deal with intended use. So I would not be in favor of us pursuing standards across the board for the entire city without substantial input to say, yes, we'd like to do it, because I don't recognize it as a potentially one size fits all. Again, we have comprehensive plans, we have Florida state statute, we have ordinances, we have overlays like transect zoning and historic districts, which also create standards. And I wouldn't want to apply one standard across the board. I was very excited when I heard you bring it up, even if I may not support it in the way that it's said. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Book. So, yeah, for years I've had, there are a couple of intersections very specifically where I have heard from drivers and cyclists and pedestrians concerned about the lack of visibility because of a fence. It's a very common thing that people bring to me. Sometimes the same person over and over again, but not always. It's been, for some of these, a pretty common complaint that, or concern that I've heard specifically to safety. Refresh me, please, somebody. Doesn't our comp plan talk about the eyes on the street concept? I mean, do we have some language to that effect, or that at least leads you in that direction? And an 8-foot fence is very specifically, an impediment to that. One of the ways we keep the community safe is by people being able to look out from where they are and seeing if there's something going on the street that should be a concern. I tend to, we don't have a lot of 8-foot fences in front yards, but where we do, it is often a concern. 8-foot fence is 2 feet taller than me. I mean, just for, let's think about how that works. That's a big fence. And we do have some of those. So I don't know, these are things to think about as we go back around the horn here. Commissioner Willits.
Mr. Mayor, so over the years, before being on the commission and during the commission, I have received some complaints about fences. two of them very specifically about the fence on South Main. These were verbal complaints. Someone said, why were they allowed to do this, right? And at the time, I assumed they were allowed because it's allowed. And it sounds like evidently that we do have some standards within transect zones, which will affect some of our commercial area, not all of our commercial area, it sounds like. And then similar to the mayor's, hearing from people who, particularly fences on corners, and it may be kind of a front yard, and it's, maybe not 8 feet, 6 feet, and they just can't see around it. They can't see around it well enough to trust that they're not going to get hit when they pull out. I know that I've seen, I'm trying to remember exactly, there's one specific in Northwest Gainesville I'm familiar with, over 6 feet along an entire front yard. That's not on the corner. But I've gotten some complaints, but usually it's complaints where it's like, well, that's just kind of the way it is, right? But I didn't offer at the time to change policy on those because, like Commissioner Chestnut said, probably there are more things that are more important for me to be gleaning from people and taking back to commission. But I've heard some complaints about it. Some about visibility, but people also have visibility complaints about overgrown bushes, temporary signs. There's a sign on South 13th that I can barely see around that says, rooms for rent. It's very large and square, and I cannot see around it to see who's coming at me at 45 miles or more coming up South 13th. So I hear them, but they're usually just sort of complaints. Haven't gotten to this, so this is a potential opportunity to look at it. So whether it's both in all residential or any of the other commercial that's not currently covered. And so that, I guess my question is, do we have any commercial areas that are not covered in Transect where we might be looking at where this might apply? Or are we talking about this one only residential?
So visual impediments to the visual triangle or to the right-of-ways, those are enforceable today. And we do enforce those cases. So if there are obstructions like that, we can certainly get in touch with the Code Enforcement Division, and we will look at enforcing those, residential, commercial, or otherwise.
Right. Usually I tell people, get on that app and report it there, because then it's geocoded to the corner. People know, staff knows, everybody knows, maybe even a picture. So it really helps staff, figure out exactly what's happening.
And as you said, also including shrubs, not just fences.
Yeah, exactly. So, thank you, Mr. Upton. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Willis. Commissioner Chestnut.
Thank you. So, so where is this a problem? Do we have 10 yards with an 8-foot fence? 2, 3, 4? Where is it a problem?
These aren't permitted, so we're not entirely sure. It's not. There's no repository of the size of fences because we don't permit them in the city of Gainesville.
But, if we want to go and change, make this something that is code enforceable, we have to have an idea of how many present a problem. I'm really driven by the economic impact on people with getting hit by code enforcement. Very much concerned there. That's not a bad thing, and I'm not saying I don't appreciate code enforcement, but if we don't need to just add extra work to them. So I'm trying to find out, are there 10 yards, 20 yards that have this problem in the city? Or 2, or 3? So instead of changing a whole policy, if it's 2 or 3 yards or 5 yards, go and sit down and talk with the people.
So when I go through neighborhoods, I don't see a lot of people that put 8-foot fences up in their yards because it's frankly kind of a rude thing to do to your neighborhood. Like you have this gigantic wooden fence across an entire parcel of your neighborhood. Even though we don't have regulations on it, most people have this. I think they want their yard to look nice. They put up a nice white picket fence. It is open to folks. There are some folks who do it, and that's just how it is within a city. It struck me that as I went through every other city within the state of Florida, not all of them have this, but a lot of them, at least most of them that we have in backup, have some kind of regulation. There is, I think there's a worthy discussion about how we deal with grandfathered in fences that are in there. But we're also talking, as we're talking about regulations going forward, are we going to allow someone to erect a new 8-foot fence? Or if a fence company is being hired, will they turn to the property owner and say, oh yeah, of course we can build an 8-foot fence. That's what the city regulation says. So you start making regulations as they go forward, and then slowly but surely these things start to change over time. And so there may be a way, and I know that adds a different administrative burden, but to grandfather in existing ones or to create grace periods or other things within there. So you're not going and hitting folks with code enforcement, but what that means is 5-10 years down the road, there's just not, large tracts of unsee-throughable fences in the front.
Go on, I'm thinking.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Chestnut. Commissioner Engel.
So my mother-in-law bought a house just around the corner from us. It's a great little setup. We get to visit family. It's all nice. The house she bought, the people she had bought it from had gone to war with their next door neighbors. What the argument originally was, but for whatever reason, they did not see eye to eye. So the person she bought a house from had run a 6-foot fence the entire length of their property line all the way out to the front yard. So between the driveways, all the way to the street, basically, a 6-foot fence between those two houses. You couldn't see backing up out of my mother-in-law's driveway. It was like you had no idea what was coming down the road. It, to me, was a real safety hazard in pain. Fortunately, we talked to the neighbors. We thought they were great. Turned out to be some absolutely lovely people that we're still friends with now. So we went, the first thing we did was tear that fence down so it wasn't this weirdly divided 2 driveways on there. I have no idea if that was, I guess, by code that would have been okay this time, but I can see where that caused a real problem. Till we tore it apart, there's no problem now. So I can see where there is some value in having some visibility, especially in the front yards and neighborhoods, because that just by itself meant that if you were standing in our front yard, you couldn't see down the road at all, especially backing out of that driveway. I would be real hesitant to start putting requirements on people that already had fences. Like I think grandfathering stuff in is obviously something that would need to happen. I think that there are situations where taller fences aren't necessary if you've got security issues or any of that. But in general, it seems like we're kind of the outlier, and if we want to take a look at making something that falls into kind of more standard practice and best practices with our kind of peer cities around the state, I'd be happy to take a look at what ordinance came back. It's kind of where I stand on it.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Engel. And I will say, we have, I know this could make codes and planning feel a little uncomfortable, but we have lots of pre-existing non-conforming uses that are grandfathered. There are a number of those. And I don't have a problem with that. The way I see this is it draws a line in the sand and says, from here forward, we're not going to design a whole neighborhood where we build compounds, which are legal now. We could do that, but I would hope that nobody would, because it's a fairly unneighborly sort of neighborhood at that point. But I see this more as a going forward new construction issue than as one that we want to enforce existing issues. So let's go around one more time, and then we will go to the public. Commissioner Book.
If you want to see if there was public first, that'd be fine since I already
Okay.
spoke one time.
All right. Madam Clerk.
Mayor, we have Donald Shepard.
Welcome, Mr. Shepard.
I see that we brought up a lot of comments that are essential towards the safety of people backing out of the driveways and that. I think, as has been mentioned about shrubs, I think that's an outlook we need to take more intensity in. The property owner owns those shrubs and do not choose to take and keep them at a certain height. I think our culture department could take and go to them and ask them, why is it that you're not trimming your hedge to a certain limit? I think there should be a limit on that, because there's several places in our city that ascertain to that factor. The other thing I'm inquisitive about is our metal fencing that we have in certain areas in our city where it involves the safety of walkability and bicycling. Our bicycle board is very on alert to this factor, because when you come up to a corner, you have this metal fence or wooden fence that blocks your view, or is going out into the city or out into the sidewalk or the bicycle path that is very critical towards the safety of the bicycles. So I like what we've said here today, and we can move forward with it. But I think we need to give Codes Department more power to take an answer to these questions. They have a lot on their plate now, but I think there's more room for this. And I thank Mr. Eastman and Mayor for bringing this to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd.
The last speaker, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Commissioner Book.
So the only one speaker and not a lot of community input from what I heard. So interesting, I have a house in Northwest Gainesville in my district, and they have a solid 6-foot fence. And the reason they have that is because it backs up to a park along with some of their neighbors. And they have great concern about children going over or in or seeing in the pool and the other valuables that they have inside their enclosure. And so they've made a very conscious decision, and probably on balance, a better decision than probably embracing visibility by having that 6-foot fence. And they've in fact asked the city to do something and put yet another additional hard fence that prevents people from seeing in and getting in. And so that's my way of saying that different uses in different ways are really important, and we already have a lot of overlapping legitimate mechanisms that deal with those. The two issues that apparently we've been talking about, which is corner visibility, is already dealt with in our existing regulations, and the other one was just found guilty of a violation this morning, and I didn't even know that. So I don't like it either, by the way, when I saw Commissioner Eastman. So I looked at him like, I don't think so. But in fact, it violated existing regulations. And then you have another, like the Mr. Mayor said, there's lines in the sand. Well, these are some of our existing lines in the sand. And another one that's really tremendous for building is HOAs. Homeowner associations and condominium. I know we don't use that term too often, but multifamily apartment complexes have tremendous regulatory authority over their occupants and what they put up. And those are additional lines in the sand should they identify safety deficiencies in there. So I'm not in favor of overlaying something else and having to recreate existing systems and look back over the various nuances in our current comprehensive plan to say a one-size-fits-all and then tell a private homeowner, here's the fence you have to have. I think that that's a really bad option for us. And in 2022, when the single biggest issue in 2022, when 4 of us were running, was applying a standard across the city for single-family zoning. Fencing is not at that size, so I get that. But it is across the board, and we've had 2 or 3 other issues that across the board, when they're across the board applied, I don't think that's a good use of city resources. And it's really telling people how to live, work, and play. We can guide them, we can interact with them, we can provide them good safety practices, we can mentor them in ways that say this is how you make the places that you live, work, and walk and play safer. But I don't think we want to legislate it. I don't think that would be a good use for the city, where to put our efforts. So, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Book. Somebody want to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I agree with you broadly, Commissioner Book, which is kind of why I brought forward those single-family zoning changes. Is that if you're going to regulate what someone can do on their private property, there has to be a good reason for it. And people should. But I do think that part of the purpose of a city with codes in there, and this is not. I mean, we have lots of things that we direct. Buildings can be built this way; they can't be built that way. So that because someone is putting. People do things that might make sense for them within their own personal house or within their own personal business, and it doesn't necessarily make sense when you put it all together into one giant city that is all one and the same. As the mayor pointed out, you might have these compounds of houses, and maybe that particular person wants that for their house. If you start having neighborhoods, and this tends to happen more, I'll say, in low-income neighborhoods more than it happens in wealthier neighborhoods, is that people start putting it up so that they can feel more privacy, can feel more within there. But then suddenly when everyone on a particular block has it, that closes off the entire neighborhood to everybody. And so the question is, and this is, so I think the real question is do we want moving forward, do we want people to be allowed to put up 8-foot fence really in our front yard? I don't know where this pool is located. Usually pools are in the rear or in the backyard, but I am curious about, and I've had some conversation with staff, and I know there might be some complications in terms of, implementation. I mean, if either we agree with the policy or we don't, and then there's the question of implementation, can we, like grandfathering in existing ones, even though we don't currently have permit structures, having, grace periods, things like that. I mean, do we think that would be reasonable or possible with something like an unpermitted fence or for something like this? I guess I'm asking this to Forrest or Andrew. No, I'm not asking for permits.
I think that there are several mechanisms that could be looked at in the ultimate language that would come out of an ordinance for this. So yes, I'm sure that we could find a way with a direction.
Okay. And going back to the question you had from before, were you saying that you wanted some clear direction on side yards as well?
I think that would be important, and that would certainly be a part of some clarification or recommendations that staff could bring back if that was a direction.
I mean, I can include this in here, but the city of Orlando seems to have they have 6 feet instead of 8 feet, but they tend to allow more. They allow taller fences along side yards, but they also have something reverse corner lots, which I guess are ones that are in areas that you would have a front yard overlooking, which tend to be a little bit lower. But I guess I could we could include. Would you like it if we included like other cities to look at, or what kind of direction would be helpful for you guys going forward here?
I think a lot of the research is certainly in that backup, and we would look right to those cities that are in the backup that were a lot of the basis of that research.
Okay.
Something really we would want to also look at in looking at any sort of peer cities is what is their permitting process for this. So again, if you have an established home currently today, if you decided to build a fence later, we do not permit that really largely under the Florida Building Code and requirements under the building code. So that would have to be something that we would really need to think through.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Forrest. So we could theoretically pass this with and I did not ask for staff to return with an ordinance or we'll draft updates to the city's fencing ordinance. But to come forward to us with recommendations, we could include some options for ways that we could grandfather in or allow grace periods for existing fences as particular options in there, which may be able to give us a few more options as we're going forward. But I'll let some of the other commissioners speak. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Eastman. Commissioner Willets.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to be clear, we're only talking really about when we say front yard, it's still within X number of feet from street. So a large complex like a condo, I live in a condo, or we have a pool in the back, but we are, the front of our buildings are, 75 feet away from the street because we're parking in front. And so the fence that we are, I think, required to make sure that no one can easily access our pool is, it might actually be at the rear of our building, so maybe it is really at the rear yard. But even then, this wouldn't apply because we're not talking about something that's right at the street. Is that correct? This is really, we talk about mostly residential areas because we're talking about something with where the building is certain feet from the street, where a fence would be a certain feet from the street, not a larger complex. And I do want to also understand how this applies to large apartment complexes that might front a very busy 4-lane street, and they may have a 6 feet fence or wall, because really you're entering in on a private street, and that's where all the apartment complexes are. They have basically a sound wall. So I want to understand where that fits in, because I know code is different in every little place. So where does this fit into the idea that larger complexes can have fences somewhere within, but also larger complexes that might have basically a sound wall up against a very busy street, and it may only be, 10 feet from the street or from the sidewalk. How does that fit in?
So there are a lot of different questions that are wrapped up in that.
Yeah.
So the very first one would be that for the yard setback, it's sort of the rectangle inside of the rectangle. And now in that yard area is really largely where the code today is talking about that 8-foot limit. To your question for residential complexes or even commercial complexes, industrial, that's where we would need to continue to work with you all on the guidance and the direction for where does this apply? Where would this apply? How does this apply for single-family neighborhoods that may have HOAs or deed restrictions versus apartment complexes? To add a small bit to your question regarding pools, that is a good point where there are also other requirements, of course, from other jurisdictions and other entities regarding pools specifically. It may either be an insurance company, state health department, and state regulations there as well.
But I mean, other cities manage to do it, and there's pools, so I imagine there's a way to get it done. I asked specifically because I have a lot of large apartment complexes in my district. Some of them, like on either Wilson Road or Southwest 34th, they very much have a pretty sturdy fence. I don't know if it's 4, 5, 6 feet, but it's really they do want to block off because they're really blocking noise and trying to control access to one place, to one part of their larger complex, and they have a street, but a private street usually, for all the circulation. And so just how that fits in, I wouldn't want them to not be able to have perhaps, let's say, a 6-foot fence along a road that the speed limit's 45 and has, let's say, 20,000 cars a day on it. Like that fence there, usually we don't talk about the eyes on the street from a large complex like that because the eyes on the street are the eyes on the internal private street, not do we need eyes on the 5-lane, freeway. So I do have some concerns about how that would fit in, but it sounds like other cities manage it. So it just would it in essence probably touch different parts of code. We're already talking that this would perhaps change things in little different places, right?
Several different parts of code, yes.
Okay.
And so to your question about that, for how that applies to apartment complexes, really actually there are sections in our comprehensive plan and code that encourage using walls and fencing as a part of compatibility buffers, especially for those uses adjacent that may be single-family uses. It allows staff really to, with justification from the applicant, determine whether or not either a hedge or a fence or a wall is appropriate to meet the requirements for these compatibility buffers. So we would certainly need to look at that section as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I can see some people perhaps saying something is a little unfair here or there, but we have lots of things that apply to different types of zoning across the city. I don't I don't object to the idea that we do something that applies across the whole city. Almost all laws apply to the whole city, or large chunks. I don't disagree with that, but it sounds like it'd be a nuanced policy that we're really going to have to see how other places do it and come back, and there may have to be some tinkering. So I think I can support this going forward and seeing what we see. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Willits. I am, to be clear, nothing we do today has the force of law. If we were passed anything today, it would be to direct, an ordinance to come back that we could tinker with, or to say no, we're not going to do it at all. But we can't pass a law today that changes, that pertains to fencing. I'm interested in continuing to have the conversation because, as Commissioner Willis pointed out, other cities are able to figure this out. We could probably figure it out too. I would definitely want to, thinking for the future, grandfather. I think that's an important component. Because Commissioner Chestnut's absolutely correct. We don't want to penalize people who have either already made the investment or who purchased something that already had the fence. We're not here to penalize folks, but rather to use good design principles moving forward. That's what I would be comfortable with. Commissioner Book, you were talking about HOAs. I saw a couple of days ago that someone has, I don't know if this will go anywhere, but someone has introduced legislation in Florida legislature to outlaw HOAs. And stuff happens. So nothing surprises me at this point. Anyway, I don't see any of the lights, so just go somewhere it doesn't right about now. Commissioner Eastman.
All right, well, I would like to move that the city commission direct staff to prepare draft updates to the city's fencing ordinance and return to the commission with recommendations that they should include establish a maximum height of 4 feet for fences located in front yards, establish a maximum height of 8 feet for fences located in rear yards, consistent with standards by peer cities in Florida, with opportunities to grandfather in existing fences and include any other changes staff deems necessary for implementation. So the only change between that is that we added options for grandfathering in existing fences. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Did you want to address that or you want to wait till
No, I'm
afterwards?
gonna make a separate motion.
Okay, gotcha.
Thank you.
And so I see no other lights on that one. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so that passes 4-2 with Commissioners Chestnut and Book in dissent. All right, Commissioner Chestnut.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, I want to put a motion on the floor to direct staff to seek input from neighborhood organizations such as Black on Black Crime Task Force and other similar organizations regarding residential fence heights in front and backyards. Staff must include this information when reporting back to the commission when reviewing the fencing ordinance.
Is there a second?
I just had a question before that.
Well, so let's get a second.
Second.
Okay, so we got a motion and a second. Go ahead. Yeah, Commissioner Book.
Good. Yeah, I thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Commissioner Chestnut, you probably would be business community also, because you're talking about it. This is
Okay.
business. I mean, it's the Black and Black Crime Task Force is good. Community organizations, homeowner and neighborhood watches are really important. But impacts the business community and economic development and things along those lines. So those would be good ones. I think that's probably implied in your motion regardless. But,
Well, but we could include that, your list in this
yeah,
motion.
it's not just residential. It's the impacted stakeholders, whoever those might be. Impacted stakeholders would probably be the most broad way to say it. So that was just my thought.
All right, well, I would like to include that list, Mr. Mayor and Madam Clerk, and include the comment impact to stakeholders, economic impact to stakeholders.
That was a good one, wasn't it?
Very good.
So I'll support a motion that has a very short list of specific organizations, but not every organization in town. Because we are, if this is considered as an ordinance, then we will have, we'll notice it.
Okay, but it's not every organization in town. I think the city has 28 advisory boards. All of them are not neighborhood crime organizations. So the police department, I think, manages this list, or somebody manages that list, but they could go through that list. This comes out of the city manager's office.
The police department, if I might, Mr. Mayor, the police department still has its crime watch list that they manage. John Alexander's Community Relations Government Affairs Department has a more comprehensive list of neighborhood organizations that they reach out to on various occasions for events.
Right, well, I'm only interested in the crime.
Okay.
The crime and the business organizations.
So which business organizations? I don't.
I'll call on my colleague.
I would say the city staff could figure out who are, when I say impacted stakeholders, that could be the Realtors Association.
Sure.
That could be the Downtown Advisory Board. That could be like the former existence of GDOT,
Right.
Gainesville Downtown Owners Tenants. We know, I mean, I
We have
trust
them.
staff
Yes, sir.
to figure out who would be those
Department-
most appropriate
The
ones.
Department of Sustainable Development had a list of course,
Absolutely.
and so that list has been compiled with the list that Community Relations kind of manages. And so we could figure that out. We could work that list out.
And that list has been revised and refined.
Okay, any other?
I would say, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I didn't mean to cut you off there. We just had an ordinance which is in draft form that we passed that relates to matters like this, which is when something impacts X percentage or X amount of people in the city, that there's notification systems. So while we haven't quite brought that back to us yet, it's kind of similar in nature to that. It's who are the people that we need to impact and advertise so that we can get sufficient input to make a really good informed decision.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Book. Commissioner Eastman?
I do get worried about, this seems like an expansive list of folks that we would be asking them to, I'm still not entirely clear. So are we asking them to go and meet with each one of these groups, like in person, or what kind of outreach are we asking for here?
I think staff can decide. They can meet in person, they can meet on Zoom, but I want public input. This is impacting the public. So I want their input before you impose on them a regulation.
Okay, so we would be meeting with all the different crime watch groups potentially, the business groups.
However staff wants to design it, we represent the public.
Right.
That's what we represent. I want public input.
I agree with public input. I'm trying to balance out ensuring that we have public input because we're still at a fairly early stage of all of this.
Well, that's when you want the input, at the
Right.
beginning of something. You want the input early on. But we represent the public.
Right.
And again, if a response is expected from me, I would simply sit down with John Alexander and the chief of police and DSD and parks and everybody else that has lists. We'll call down who makes sense in terms of trying to have either a Zoom meeting or a face-to-face or part of a community first engagements that we already have, and we'll just figure out how to engage the public and not make it, extra additional work. And if it is extra additional, we'll do what is necessary before the item comes back to the commission in a format that you have to vote on.
Thank you, Madam Manager. All right, anybody else? Is that accurate?
I think that's it. I think so.
Okay. All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously with Commissioner Duncan Walker absent. Yep, you're welcome. Anything else on this item? And I don't know if all our codes folks who are here are going to stick around for the next item, but just in case you don't, I want to take the opportunity to recognize Pete Backhouse, who has been with the city for 43 years. Started when he was 7 years old with the city of Gainesville. So
Police department?
you're with the GPD initially, is that correct?
Okay.
Yeah. And is about to engage in well-deserved retirement after 43 years. And I just wanted to recognize you while you're still here in the room. So thank you. Thanks.
Very nice.
Madam Clerk.
Mayor, we're on to 2025-652. Commissioner Eastman, legalize skateboarding in public parks with recommendation the General Policy Committee directs staff to draft an ordinance repealing Section 18-2019 of the City Code, thereby allowing skateboarding, rollerblading, and roller skating in public parks. Staff should return to the City Commission with any additional regulations needed to ensure public safety, reduce liability, preserve city property, and provide appropriate operational discretion.
Thank you.
Hold on. Thank you, Madam Clerk. I will say that after reading the backup on this item this morning, I went to lunch across the street, and as I came back from lunch across the street, walking through the City Hall Plaza, I saw the sign that said you can't skateboard here. So that was interesting. I may not have noticed that had I not just read the backup.
Well, I wouldn't have noticed it if it weren't for Mr. Barlow pointing out to me some of these things, which I will go into. But first of all, I just want to say I didn't intend to have, this doesn't, I recognize that this is generally outside of the standard process of how we bring things forward, that city commissioners bring forward exact presentations like this. I didn't intend to have two on the same agenda item, but these have been kind of things that have been sitting in the pipeline for a little while, and so I wanted to make sure that, so I wanted to put it on here.
So before you go further, Commissioner Eastman, let me point out once again, you mentioned earlier that this is the sort of thing that would have gone through our policy office a few years ago. Going back many years, this is just how we did. Anytime a commissioner had an idea, this is how we did it. And we designed a policy office, which was for a time directed by Mr. Folston. And it was a really good system. But in one of our years of having to make cuts, it was a victim of those cuts. And we absolutely, I was going to recommend that when we are in a better financial position, we should absolutely consider reinstating that office because it is very functional and irons out some of these questions before they get to the commission. But in the absence of that, this is the way stuff kind of a way that things can filter through. So,
Right.
I'm sorry, Commissioner.
And I like making PowerPoint, so this is all great for me. This one, you guys asked about, you guys talked about things bubbling up from the community. This one really came from the community. I see Ryan Barlow is here in the audience. He came and spoke to me at my office, must have been 7-8 months ago about how other cities are embracing skateboarding in public areas more so, that getting rid of some of their old, outdated, in the 1980s, 1990s anti-skateboarding laws, and really and revitalizing in underused spaces to allow for skateboarding. I said, that sounds really cool. My head's in cutting budgets, as it has been the entire time we have been here, and I don't know, where to go with all of it, until I also stumbled on City Hall Plaza as I was getting my bike out of the bike locker over here, that you are not allowed to skateboard, roller skate, or rollerblade within in this plaza, and it turns out that is across the board at the city. Started talking with some of our city staff. There was no real heartache about the idea of this. I think some of them were surprised that this was a rule that we had on the books, and so but I do think it has real impact. It stops us from being able to have skateboard days, do things like that. But I'll go into all of this as we go through. But so I'll just do a brief overview of skateboarding. It's a large growing sport. Started in the 1970s as kind of a street sport, where I think it got more of like a reputation of kids going out on the streets grinding on various things, but has been really grown into. It was invented, I think, over 50 years ago. So it's now has a large number of folks of different generations that go out there. It has expanded from just street skating, vert skating, you even have longboarding, where it's just used as transportation for short trips. I'll say for folks who who use RTS a lot, it's a really nice way. You can just grab a skateboard on a bus, you can go off of there, do that last mile, and it's much easier than putting the bike in the front. So it works as multiple, there's lots of different ways that being able to jump on four wheels on a skateboard can be used by people and is being used by people across the city. And this doesn't get talked about very much, though Ryan Barlow likes to talk about it quite a bit. That Gainesville is really the birthplace of modern street skating. There was the skateboard move that has allowed all street skating is something called the ollie, which just basically allows you to get your skateboard up into the air so that you can do anything else. That was invented here in Gainesville in the Briarwood neighborhood back in 1981. Rodney, he moved from the Briarwood neighborhood out to an unincorporated area in Alachua County, and then invented that, as well as 37 other tricks, some of which are sort of the basis of modern skateboarding. That he is broadly referred to as the godfather of street skating. If you go to Possum Creek Skate Park, you can see the nice mural of Rodney Mullen there. So we do have this very rich history in the city of Gainesville. Is really the birthplace of this huge cultural and sport here. And so just broadly, here are some of our, we have 3 skate parks in the city of Gainesville. This is not about skate parks, it's more about regulations, but just to give a broad overview of skate parks. You have Possum Creek Skate Park, which is far and away our largest skate park. We just invested in lights over there about 2 or 3 years ago, so folks can do that at nighttime. And then we have 2 other smaller skate parks, our MLK Skate Park and our Westside Skate Park. They're kind of, plug and play skate parks with these small things that you can put into there, but it's they are places that folks can go if they want to skateboard and go through there. And then we got more things coming down the pike. We've obviously approved Depot Park and the Knott Gym. This is their rendering of what they're planning, what they're thinking of doing there, where there will be a skate park just south of Depot Park. And then, of course, as we're talking about MLK Center and what we're doing with Citizens Field, that is not in the plans going forward. So we'll be losing that smaller skate park. Hopefully we'll get something that's nicer that could be also a music venue along with it, is what they're thinking through at the moment. So here's our current skateboarding regulations. Skateboarding is allowed on any sidewalk or road in the city. I'm sure there are some roads that maybe FDOT roads, things like that they're not allowed, but some cities have very explicit anti-road regulations, anti-sidewalk regulations. We don't have anything like that in the city of Gainesville. We do have this particular, and you're allowed to skateboard in park facilities specifically designated for this purpose, which is the 3 skate parks that I just mentioned: Possum Creek, MLK Center, Westside Park. And that is under the list of prohibited activities in parks, 1820-19. Under prohibited activities, unless designated otherwise, the use of roller skates, rollerblades, or skateboards, except on park facilities designated for this purpose. And I went back through the old Laserfish. From what I could tell, this was passed in 1981, December 14th, that we passed this. And it was coming at a time that there was a whole lot of cities that were moving in this direction. I found this in an old Gainesville Sun, where they're debating the skateboard invasion, that skateboarders are invading the streets of Gainesville, and they're trying to, they were deciding whether whether they had the capability within the police department to arrest all of them, and they decided that would be too much work for us to arrest all the skateboarders, which came up with a popular a phrase from the 80s and 90s, skateboarding is not a crime. You'd see these bumper stickers up. So we weren't the only city that did this. This was across the board. That's why that became a national phrase, but we were certainly part of that. But over time, this is real. Cities have really started to change their tune on this. You have Bordeaux, France, which Ryan pointed out to me. A friend of his lives in that has really tried to revitalize used spaces. Here in the state, San Francisco has moved in a similar direction. Former Mayor London Breed had talked about trying to have their City Hall Plaza be more used for skateboarding. Tampa, Florida in 2022, also they eliminated some of their regulations related to skateboarding on streets. Really just how do we move from an exclusion policy into more of an inclusion policy. So as I mentioned, a lot of the folks that grew up skateboarding in the 70s, 80s, they're now much older, they're professionals, they're urban planners. This was from a paper that came out in 2025 from I think Colbrath is his name, that kind of looked at city regulations on a spectrum from exclusion to inclusion, free and subcultural to tame and sportified, and then talked about how cities can make things more open and the benefits of cities moving more to an inclusive policy. And so here in Florida, you have something similar. You got the Artist Walk Skate Park in Jacksonville, where they're trying to have more free-flowing stuff. I've not been to that one. I have been to the Tallahassee one, which is right next to FAMU. So they call it the Skateable Art Park, where you can skateboard on a rattler right next to FAMU, your alma mater, Commissioner Chestnut. So you're seeing cities really try to embrace this. I'll point out that as we're talking about city regulations, I went through Tallahassee's regulations, called up folks there. I don't see any regulations that they have about skateboard or rollerblading, roller skating on their books at all. So they're one of the cities that have moved in that direction as well. And I'll point out that I went through 4 other cities: St. Pete, Tampa, Tallahassee. I don't see any other cities that also have a broad regulation against skateboarding in their public parks. They all have kind of their own things within there, and we can get into what authority our park staff have after this, so that we're not saying it's a free-for-all. We're saying, instead of no, except, we're saying yes, but with certain provisions within there. So I'll go into that here in a second. So here are the existing regulations. If you were to strike 18-2019 from the books entirely, the city manager has the authority to promulgate rules and regulations for the use of public buildings, parks, and playgrounds, which, as far my read on it, and I think is that it gives broad discretion to city manager or designee, which I guess would probably be Roxy in this instance, to determine what makes sense within public parks, what is public safety, what is safe to have within there. And then under prohibited activities, you cannot deface, damage, or hurt any park facility. So anything that someone grinding on things, that is also enforceable and regulatable. So my thought is how to move forward is just to direct staff to repeal this in its entirety, and then as needed, staff can come back to us in the future with things that any extra ordinances that might need to ensure public safety, reduce liability, preserve city property, and provide appropriate operational discretion. But it looks, city staff have broad discretion to promulgate rules within parks as needed, and so this is more just moving from, like I said, an exclusion policy where you're saying you can't do it, except in specific instances. It says you can do it, but now we're going to create rules under which you can do this or not do it, and that is at the discretion of staff. And so, and that's what I was, and so that would be my recommendation is how we move forward.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Eastman. Commissioner Chestnut.
Thank you. I just have one question. Now, why would you remove it from the MLK Center?
I think that is it. That's just in our current plans at the moment. It's like the MLK Center does not, the 8th and Waldo does not have a skate park in it, and what has come forward from the consultant. I was just doing a broad overview of what the future of skateboarding looks like in the and so that is not within the current plans, is my understanding. Is it in the current plans? I'm getting.
Just never thought of it.
Oh,
You thought of it?
we'll get around to it.
Okay.
Yeah. If we would like to change that, of course, that is,
Yeah.
we are currently creating the design.
We can work on that part in
Oh, you don't want to talk about 8th and Waldo today, Mr. Mayor?
Oh, yeah, of course he does, of course he does. Well, no, I don't have anything against it going into the MLK Center. I just was wondering here why you would remove it, but I didn't know it wasn't over there. I thought it was.
And Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure that we were removing it from the design, but without looking at the design, I can't tell you for sure.
It's not on any of the plans that have been brought forward to us, is my recollection.
Yeah, I hope I'm not breaking news here. It's just in the current design plans for 8th and Waldo, that is not currently within the design plans. Like, of course, we are having active discussions about what the future of that looks like. So it's possible that it could be put back into there. There's no reason, but I mean, that is not currently in the design plans.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, you're welcome. Commissioner Willetts.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Yeah, so I was one that when I told the consultants, yes, I wanted a bigger and better. The current skate facility there is really kind of it's not a fully designed, it's kind of a, what can we get kind of off the shelf kind of, let's get some equipment. It's not nearly anything like Possum Creek, truly. So I said we need bigger and better, but fitting it on the site, dollars, but if we want 2 pools and all that, it just doesn't fit on the site really in that kind of volume of, because I want a skate park that costs, $1 million, not $100,000 just prop up the little boxes again. So I've talked to staff and some complaints. I had a slightly different vision for 8th and Waldo, but we're not there yet. So no, I knew that it was coming out because I wanted a larger facility there so that we had some balance between East and West, because Possum is a great facility. It's it's big, it's amazing. So Commissioner Eastman, you got to tell what is grinding on something. You got to define the stuff for us.
I guess you guys haven't played Tony Hawk Pro Skater or anything.
Yeah.
You don't know?
You just Commissioner Book, do you know?
I'm pretending that I'm not as cool as I am.
So one of the things with city property is like you can, skateboarders will they'll jump the skateboard up and then they'll go over city property. So you'll see those little bumps that are along the outside of rails and things like that. Skate stops, those are designed to stop those. So that you're not damaging, ledges that were not originally designed for a human being to jump on top of it.
As opposed to in our skate parks, we have specific, I don't know what to call them, that are designed for that, metal rails, right?
Right.
Or typically in skate parks. Okay. So the only thing I have to question about how electric skateboards and speed, and I know that we can restrict speed, I think, in parks, but this I've talked about it in some other forms of electric vehicles that I think we're coming to this crux of, you can have electric skateboards, like a hoverboard, which really isn't a skateboard, but with that single wheel, the electric little kick scooters, and now electric unicycles. They're all converging on, some of it is for transportation, some of it's kind of for fun. I mean, you can do tricks on scooters technically, but I wouldn't recommend it. So I just kind of want to know how we can then control speed in parks, because an electric skateboard can get 20, 25, 30. And I know that on trails, we're supposed to have a speed limit, and staff would have to, I think it's 15 miles an hour. But in a park on, let's basically say a sidewalk or just a trail that goes around it, I don't want skateboards going 15 miles an hour. I probably don't want them going 10. But how we can control that somehow, so to allow skateboarding, but some people, when you say skateboarding, they mean they're electric, that they kind of use for transportation and now whipping around parks. So I don't know where that fits into what parks can create, or do we have to create it in code, or is it parks that are allowed to have those rules? And I don't know who on staff can kind of. I didn't see you back there, Roxy. Sorry.
Welcome, Ms. Gonzalez.
Hello, Roxy Gonzalez, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs. So currently, our parks, not all of our parks are staffed. So to gauge that, monitor that, and enforce that is nearly impossible at this moment. The only staffed park we have is Depot Park, and post-budget cuts is a very limited time that we have staff within there. So there's no gauging that. Now, the electrical scooters, the only electrical scooters that we can dictate the speed on within the parks, and it's only in Depot Park, is the company that the city's working with, we slow them down once they enter the park, or we restrict them from going in certain areas. It'll shut down automatically. But outside of that, in the other parks, I would not know how to
Or do
be
we
able to
just have
enforce that.
posted speed limits anywhere?
No.
Okay. Depot Park is one where we even encourage people, like, please get off your bike, walk your bike in that ring right around the water feature. You know, we have trails that are sort of on the outside in different parts. But so how we manage all these different users is of interest to me, because I know people will complain, you know, if they're walking their child, you know, a 2-year-old, they don't like people whipping around them, and a skateboard that can go 20 miles an hour, which electric skateboards can easily go 20 miles an hour. Just how and I know we're not out there, you know, issuing tickets or whatnot, but what we can do to control it, or say, no, you can't have electric skateboards in parks. Are we talking about, is this just, you know, an analog skateboarding versus electric? And can we control that by ordinance versus?
So our current park signs at Depot Park say people operated vehicles, people operated things only.
Okay.
So that's how we go about it right now.
And so I don't know if that's something that we would apply across all. Depot Park, yeah, that comes to mind because it's really where lots of different types of people meet and then go off on trails or whatnot. So I'm interested in how we can assist that our parks don't have a lot of people on electric, all these kind of things going 20 miles, to kind of limit it to people powered. And I know there's probably some parks that have a real trail that touches them or whatever. And trail system, I feel a little less concerned about. People are going to ride bikes for more transportation, and I don't want to limit that. But just a little trail, little sidewalks that are inside of a park. If there's a way that we can somehow manage that as opposed to opening it up completely, and I don't know if there's ideas on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Willits. We can, as we referred to earlier, not all this has to be an ordinance. This can be made rules through PRCA by virtue of the city manager's authority as needed per park, so that we don't accidentally, outlaw the use of electric vehicles in general for transportation, when in fact what we're trying to do is keep Depot Park itself from being a speed zone. But there are ways to write those as rules rather than as ordinances, I think. Does that sound accurate, Madam Manager?
Yeah, it does. Just having a small sidebar with the attorney and just listening to what Ms. Gonzalez said about, the only park that we have staffed is Depot. And just thinking about the risk factors involved, and just making sure that operationally there is no expectation of park staff, to lean in or do anything. I think it needs to be probably flushed out a little bit more with staff from parks, from the attorney's office, from the manager's office. And that would happen, I'm assuming, in preparation of any kind of a proposed ordinance anyway.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's more work that can be done between now and the ordinance coming back to us. So, you all finished, Commissioner Williams. All right. Thank you, Commissioner Engel.
Basically the same comment. I think I'm kind of all for this. I think it's ridiculous that you can skateboard to a park, but you can't skateboard through a park. I'm sure it's going to take a little bit of tweaking on exactly, getting whatever the ground rules are. But yeah, I'm very happy to see this move forward.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Engel. Commissioner Eastman.
Yeah, I will say that I've seen other cities that have tried to regulate the multitude of vehicles. Tampa actually has the one that I think is the cleanest, which is that they allow skateboarding. They regulate skateboarding as a vehicle, and then they say that I think they have a 15 mile per hour limit on it, that you have to move out of that pedestrians have right of way, certain things like that might help with liability, or if someone gets injured or something like that would support that. I didn't want to roll that into this per se, because right now it's basically this is from 1981, right? So there's a lot of things that exist now that have nothing to do with rollerblade skateboards and roller skates, right? So you can one wheel through there, you can do all these different things. If we want to, my hope was that we would if there took some time to promulgate some rules within there, which I don't know if there needs to be that many, except for the damaging of property, but like let them do that, but eliminate 18-2019. And then I think if we wanted to, we could circle back around and say, okay, so what are our regulations for overall vehicles, and have that be broad enough that when some like 10 years from now, when someone comes up with some other, hoverboard type thing, like from Back to the Future, like, that would also be covered under it. So we're not consistently coming back to this. But I kind of just wanted to get this off the table, move this forward, and then I guess we can circle back around because I have heard complaints as well for people who feel like electric bikes, which I'm a big electric bike user, but like people are zooming down Hawthorne Trail at 30 something miles per hour. Is there some way that we could regulate that more? And I do think we have tools that we could do that with. But it's not necessarily through this, because Hawthorne Trail is kind of our trail, but not like it's overseen by parks, kind of. I feel like that requires a larger conversation than this one. But I think it's probably a conversation worth having. I know it's something you've brought up in the past as well. Yeah. All right. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Eastman. Where we're going, we don't need roads. Commissioner Buck.
Yeah, well, let's pick up on that on the technology. I do think, Commissioner Eastman, that your motion here says staff should return to the city commission with any additional regulations needed to ensure public safety. That probably includes, they might come back with something that deals with some of the technological improvements or speed. So I actually do think it's in here, I'm not sure if you intended it or not, but it gives the opportunity for city staff to say, well, there are some other considerations as you move, into the 21st century and the 22nd century, and anticipate what could be issues. It makes me think higher ed used to prohibit in almost all cases cigarette smoking, and that went away about 20 years ago when you had inhalation and vaping and non-cigarette types of uses, and they had to change to meet current standards. And so higher ed had to simply change their rules, which is what you're talking about here. I did, Madam Manager, I was thinking on this, I would just like to hear more broadly from park staff, how do you decide what goes into a park? And I think I can probably answer some of that, but I prefer to hear that from staff. You decide we're going to build a park, we're going to build a trail, we're going to do something. What happens?
Mayor, Commissioners, Roxy Gonzalez. So first and foremost is we typically do community engagements. Prior to doing that, we also refer back to our needs assessment. To jumpstart, before community engagements, we go into needs assessments, and we find that portion in that section in that quadrant, because that's why we revised our needs assessment per district, so that we know the needs in each district. And then we do our community engagements and see what the community needs, and depending on the park, if it's a regional park, which are the larger parks, it's a broad community engagement because those regional parks are really highly accessible to everybody within the city on a daily basis. Like, they tend to go there. Football, you travel across town to go play football, whatever side it's on, and so forth. If it's a neighborhood community, we really do push towards the neighborhood because they're the ones that get impacted the most with who comes in and out of those parks. So it all gauges basically based off of the community engagement and what the need is there. Then we also go into stakeholders. Who was using that park prior, or who uses that neighborhood for certain uses, and look at the stakeholders there. So an example of that is currently with Tom Petty, though the tennis courts are tennis courts, we had fencing, we had cheerleading groups, we had bike polo groups that utilized the tennis courts. So we worked with those, we try to work with those individuals that do that as well to get their engagement for the need, to see what goes in where. And then if we can't fit it in that location, we look at other locations that it may fit in with the community engagement for that other location as well.
And then if there's things that you want to prohibit in a particular park, the mayor talked about rule promulgation. You have the capability to say you can't do X in a park, or we can put signage. What kind of things do you do there as it relates to kind of, or hours, for example, of operation? Tell a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the hours of operation all fall within our ordinance as is now. So if there is a change within hours of operations, we do bring it up to the city manager's office. And as a city as a whole, we all come to agreement to what the hours of operation are for that. That tends to also involve some community engagement as well in regards to hours of operation. When it involves a park that has lights, that is huge with community engagement to see how it's going to impact the neighborhood. And and that also runs through as a city as a whole through the city manager's office. I also would like to state that when we do these community engagements, we don't go in blind and just say what is there that you want and how you want it. We do research and go on a national search of what is trending. And then I do a lot of research within the state of Florida of what is trending by reaching out to other Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs Department throughout the state of Florida, either in similar size or just in new innovative ideas. And we present those as well. If the community is not interested in it, then we don't do it. But it is key to bring in these innovative ideas that other cities are doing so that there is an exposure of it to see if there's an interest.
So it kind of, as I hear you, basically you look at trends in recreation and activity, passive and active. You determine what probably fits the needs of that neighborhood or adjacent community. There may be incompatible uses if something's too noisy, too much light, then obviously that's something you take into
Correct.
consideration as you develop that plan.
Correct, and to answer the rules and regulations, we do a lot of rules or regulations that we have in place currently are in place in other cities throughout the state of Florida. We make sure we match that. Even when the verbiage changes nationally, we reach out to other cities throughout the state of Florida to verify and see how the verbiage is changing and what the impacts are with the changing of verbiage. So, for example, a large dog park and a small dog park. You know, some are like they do it by weight, class, or some do it by size class, or some have different terminology that's a lot more friendly that still allows the cross use of both sizes pending on temperament. So we reach out to those cities to see what the pros and cons are for that before we go and implement any of those rules.
All right, sounds like, and the rule promulgations, for example, we probably do not want skateboards on Bo Diddley Plaza, which is a park, right? But the rule promulgation would allow that. And there's signage currently around City Hall and around Bo Diddley that you can deal with that for things, and for grinding or damage to benches and things. And you utilize those mechanisms if some incompatible use shouldn't be there.
Correct.
This is probably archaic language for that then, that's right. That's just you're bringing something in the 21st century, and if there is risk in a particular park or it's incompatible, well, Parks is going to make that decision right then. And they're going to say, you can't skateboard here because there's little children on a playground designed for 3 to 5-year-olds. So, yeah, so it's not allowed there, and you wouldn't want that or something. Beyond that, I don't see issue. If it's not allowable to pool, which is a city park, they're going to put signage up or promulgate a rule there. And otherwise, it's just a catch of something that probably just needs updating. Is there any, Madam Manager, is there any issue with deleting this language as it relates to liability and risk for the city, or maybe Mr. Attorney, since you all had that sidebar?
Mr. Attorney?
Mr. Mayor, everything you do involves risk. I mean, these are park activities. You're talking about adding athletic endeavors onto park paths and trails. Those parks, paths, and trails, they serve your disabled neighbors as well. They serve children. They are maintained to a level that is adequate currently. I'd say more than adequate, frankly, but that is adequate for pedestrian traffic because we don't allow these sorts of activities on there. If you're going to have, to allow or even encourage wheeled traffic, especially small wheels, skateboards, scooters, things like that, you're going to have to maintain them to a level to which it's reasonably safe. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, obviously. We have parks for activities. To prevent every risk is to prevent every activity. This is just considerations for you to consider. I think there's parks concerns in terms of staffing and maintenance, because again, if you're going to have this type of traffic on your park paths, I would suspect you're going to want to take more care in keeping them clear of pine cones and debris and things that could interfere with these sorts of uses. And then you're going to have, I don't know if it's Public Works or Parks that actually maintains the pavements. And then additionally, you will have risk concerns. So these are all components that for any exploration of this, I would talk with Parks, I would talk with Public Works, I would talk with Risk, and then ultimately determine, is that your funding priority? None of these are legal concerns, though, frankly, so it's not really my place to be interceding these, but I think they're all reasonable concerns for you.
I just look at the second line of the motion, and I think it takes in everything that you just talked about. So if the city staff, park staffs want to ensure public safety and figure out you have to clear a pine cone to reduce liability, then they need to tell us when they come back, here might be some of the collateral costs of what we're talking about, and maybe we change our mind. Preserve city property is the same thing, and operational discretion is the rule promulgation. So you're right. I mean, there is inherent risk with activity. On the other hand, that's what parks and recreation is about, is activity, and it could be signage, wayfinding, wider sidewalks, more periodic cleaning of trailways and things like that. And we need to know if that's going to have cost associated with it. So I would say, Commissioner Eastman, that I think your motion alludes to the fact that staff would be able to come back with those types of concrete things too. Is that? Yep. Thank you.
I do get concerned about, I don't want staff, I don't want this to take, you could theoretically look at every angle of all of these things before they go forward with it. And I do think I have a tendency to say, like we did with, where you allow folks to do stuff when issues come up, you promulgate rules at that point in order to fix them, as opposed to make sure that everything is fixed on the front end, which will mean that we could be, analyzing things indefinitely. But yes, I mean, I think that there's, particularly if there's any, liability issues. I know there's some state laws that that allow you that if you put up a sign that says that skateboarding is allowed here within these rules, that you're completely free from liability. That there's certain questions that's not it. There's
The statute provides that you're going to have to maintain them in a reasonably safe
Okay.
condition.
Yeah. And just there's little things like that that I may have missed or that we may have missed. But as far as I can tell, the striking of 18-2019 seems like we'd be able to do it without a whole lot of much more thought about it. And then as the rules come up, the city manager's office will be able to figure it out. But I mean, if we're asking folks to come back with to ensure public safety, reduce liability, yeah, I think that would certainly cover that entire area. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anyone else before we go to public comment?
I was going to, but I'm going to refrain since I'm transitioning, I'm going to refrain.
You sure?
And no, not really sure.
Come on. You sure about the transition?
No,
It's too late now.
No, I'm sure about the transition. I was talking to staff this morning about being in a position to always try to accommodate what our elected officials, our leaders, would like to do and would like to see from a policy level. I've always been in the position to say, yes, we'll try it, we'll see what we can do. And then come back to the commission and say, well, these are the concerns, and I want us to continue to be in that mode from a staffing point of view. It's one thing to promulgate from this level, but when staff comes back with a maybe not, that it's perceived as maybe we don't want to do it because we're against it, but staff has limitations. There's capacity there. And there's capacity concerns from staff. And they want to do the best all the time, but maybe sometimes they just can't deliver it. And when we deliver a message, whether it's right now, even though you may pass this, or you pass it, and we come back and say, these are our concerns, that you're listening to it, because capacity is really a real thing on the staff side. And particularly now, as you've seen the proposal in the budget to eliminate positions in parks, eliminate positions in public works. We're struggling even on a charter level in terms of trying to push through with things. There is a struggle right now. And as we continue to add things to the staff plate, it gets really, it's a concern. It's a concern of staff. I know Andrew will deal with it as he moves through the transition and work with the operational sides of it. But I mean, even in the police situation, they're going to do everything they can to protect the public because that's just their job. But if staffing and capacity is a concern, and it impacts their ability to do that, for them to stand at the podium and say that in the spite of the expectation that it's going to happen anyway, we've got to start understanding that capacity is a real issue. I don't know to what degree this is a real issue. I'd like to be able to have staff really work it out as to have it promulgated at this point. Directing staff to repeal it, and then what does that mean? Does it mean that Roxy is going to have more oversight in her parks than she has now? That's a capacity issue. From a risk point of view, have we really weighed that out to understand that? We haven't. That's a concern. That's a potential money issue for the city. And so, again, I think it's great that you have put this forward, Commissioner. I'm not objecting to it, but I'm just saying operationally, we really need the opportunity to flesh it out before you agree to just do it.
Right, and that is what the motion is on the table.
Okay.
I mean, it's and staff to draft the ordinance and then to come back with a review of things, for sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Eastman. Thank you, Madam Manager. Commissioner Chestnut, and then we'll go to the public.
Okay. I see it in a different way, what the manager is saying. She's saying before you tell staff to repeal an ordinance, send it to the staff, let them look at it, analyze it, and then bring it back. And they may come back with a recommendation to repeal. But if we give them the end result at the beginning, I mean, they're the professionals. They're going to look at it from all around the state or in their professional journals and who knows. But they may come up with something that is different. Now, I think that what I heard from staff is that there's already a problem with capacity at Depot Park. I think that's what she said, is limited there. And so I think you can achieve the same thing. Take it a different route. Refer it to them, let them come back to you with their recommendation, instead of telling them at the beginning to repeal the ordinance. It's just,
I will say that, I mean, I've had lots of conversations with staff about this up to this point. I know it's not been in any official capacity, but I've not heard any real pushback about capacity or, you know, in fact, so it is fine. We can go through the process of sending it over to them. I think the process of asking them to simply repeal the ordinance and then come back to us with other policies, which is what nearly every other city I see has, which is that they do not have a broad striking of or a broad ban on skateboarding in public parks. They have other things potentially that are in there, but I am not in favor of keeping a broad ban on these three particular activities within a public park. Because that's, what are we regulating here exactly? Like, are we trying to regulate people going through parks too quickly? Well, there's ways to regulate that. Are we trying to regulate other things? There's so I would like to repeal 18-2019 that regulates these activities entirely and bans them. And if there's other ways to fix these other issues, then that works for me as well.
Okay. Let's go to the public. I have, actually, before we go to the public, we'll put some thoughts out there. This is, once again, as we talked about at the beginning, why it is important to have a policy process. And we do not have the capacity for that right now. And that creates a problem here, because one of the things, let me back up just a second. There are a couple of ways to do that I've observed that you can really do local governance effectively as an elected official. One is we sit as a board of arbiters, and people bring projects before us and we say yes or no. The other way is for people to talk to us in the community and say, what about? Isn't this interesting? Or we don't like this. And then we work to bring those ideas forward and then find a way to take ideas and turn them into laws. Much like Schoolhouse Rock, you know, the how a bill becomes a law, that's not how it works specifically here, but a similar process, because otherwise there is no process. There's no way for the ideas of the people to become law. Otherwise, we are that filter that creates that. That works really, really well when we had that extra filter in the policy arm. Now we don't have that, so I don't know another way to bring things forward and then have the discussion and then say, and this is all very meta, I realize this is not about the issue that we're working on here, but it's affected by it. And without that policy filter, there's really no way for us to move ideas forward than this. And the reason we see this right now is because we're able to stick our heads up a little bit more than we have the last couple of years above crisis mode. And as we look up above crisis mode a little, then we start this stockpile of ideas that people have brought to us in the community, we can start filtering those out into becoming policy. And I don't know a better way to do it than the old policy department, which was really useful, but which we can't afford right now. So, but also that's what general policy committee is. You know, this is the intended use of general policy committees to have discussions about policy before it becomes law. And then the regular business meetings are regular business meetings where we say, we talked about this before, staff did this, we did this other thing. Do we make it a law or not? But this committee meeting right now is affecting its actual purpose. But we do want, and I think this potential motion, it's not a motion yet, but this potential motion does bring in the question of staff, what do you think? How would you ensure public safety, reduce liability, and preserve city property? And that is what we're directing in this potential motion to bring back, along with an action item for the commission to take, should that become possible. And then we have the discretion of saying, no, we're not going to do that, or yes, we think this is something that should move forward. But I don't know any other way for us to bring the ideas of the community forward in the absence of a policy committee without having these kinds of discussions. And there will be a point at which we can reinstate something like policy, but we're not, that clearly is not funded in the current budget or next year's budget, and probably not the year after that. But there will be a point at which it is possible. And I don't want us to forget that such a thing existed, and existed very well as a tool for policy when we have that opportunity. It's not as obvious a thing as many other things that could be funded, but boy, was it useful when it worked. We've got, by the way, a list of policy papers that have been created over the years that are available for us to reference, and some of the ideas that come to us have already been put through that policy procedure. Do we need to take these, or can we talk to the public? Let's, Commissioner Book, I think you're up next. Is it okay if we, there isn't, okay. All right, there is no public comments, all right. All right, Commissioner Book.
All right, well, let's eliminate the meta for just a second, and I'll say, I'm supporting the ordinance, or I'm supporting the motion as is, but there is much more value in general in always going to staff and saying, we think we should go in this direction. Tell us how we can do it, should we do it, what's the downsides of doing it, as opposed to say, do it and tell us the downside. So there is a difference in that, and that's at least the way I interpret some of what the city manager was saying, and I always prefer that anyway. In other words, tell us, this is really where I think we should be going, but we don't have the expertise in 95% of it, in a lot of the cases. Once in a while we have independent areas, like it's zoning and land use for you, Commissioner Eastman, it may be labor for you, Commissioner Engel, and your district like nobody's business. So that's an example. And for me, it's public safety. So I would, at least my opinion is, to go forward, we should be much more cautious about telling staff, do this, and also if there's any problems, tell us. And value the fact that we might say, we think this is where we need to look, tell us. In other words, it's almost like an intermediate. It doesn't slow things down, but it does value the input on the front end a little more, I think. So that's as it relates to that. And then when we're done voting on this, I did want to talk just a moment about policy in general. I do think we have policy processes in place. We're not probably using them to their full abilities at the moment. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Book. Commissioner Chestnut.
Yeah, I think what I want to say is probably better said at the end when we get to member comments.
Okay.
But to talk about a policy person
Okay.
at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chestnut. Commissioner Engel.
I just want to say that I'm in support of the motion. I think there is definitely the ask there for staff to come back with recommendations, and I don't know, to me, this just looks like a very outdated ordinance that doesn't really take into account a lot of how the modern world functions. And I think it's incumbent upon us when we come across those things to try and update them. I think it's a perfectly reasonable way to do that. So yeah, I'm behind this.
I'm not sure rollerblading existed in 1981, so that's an interesting idea. Commissioner Eastman.
It was actually, so if you go back to the ordinance, in 1981, they didn't use the word rollerblading. I think that got updated in the 1990s. They added that to it, and I don't know why, because I don't know the difference between rollerblading and roller skating, but they added it in the 90s. Since you brought it up, I would like to move that we direct staff to draft an ordinance repealing Section 18-2019 of the City Code, thereby allowing skateboarding, rollerblading, and roller skating in public parks. Staff should return to the City Commission with any additional regulations needed to ensure public safety, reduce liability, preserve city property, and provide appropriate operational discretion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I don't see any other lights on this, and the clerk tells me there's no public comment.
There is no public comment, Mr. Mayor.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously with Commissioner Duncan Walker absent. Madam Clerk.
Mayor, we're on to member comment.
Thank you.
Sure, Commissioner Chestnut.
Yep, Mr. Mayor, I would like to say that I would like to make a policy position a priority, even if it's a part-time, even if we start out part-time next year or in the budget, because I think you can see the necessity for having someone on board who can help us in dissecting some issues before they get here to the board. That's just all I wanted to say on it.
No, I completely agree with you, and clearly we don't have the capacity for it budget-wise right now, but it is among those things that I think are entirely useful going forward, and not every city has those, but it worked it served us as a community very well. So I'd love to see that come back when it's possible. Commissioner Eastman.
Yeah, and I think in lieu of that, there's been this backlog of policies that I wanted to push. The next one is probably the more in-depth one. I thought we'd get the easier one out of the way, is the arts in public places. We'll be talking about at the end of September, which is much more in-depth and involves money and staffing and other things. And anyway, I guess my point is that as we're talking about the next year, it might be worth having discussion, other ways where we could, give direction, have staff do a presentation so we could have some backup, maybe processize this out a little bit more so that it's not just, because all I'm trying to do is find a policy, say, okay, this ordinance makes sense, sit down with staff for a moment, you go through it, but you're right. I mean, there's probably a way to processize this out a little bit more that doesn't require an FTE, would probably require certain departments to work with us on various things to move, to give us feedback as to what's possible, and then, and then move to ordinance. That might actually be a great GPC meeting discussion at some point, is what kind of process that could look like going forward.
Thank you.
So thanks for bringing that up, Commissioner Chestnut.
Thank you, Commissioner Eastman. We have, by the way, the flow charts and all that exist for how the process works really, really well. It's just a question of having the people to do it. So, Commissioner Willits.
To this point, so our city plan board starts things and instructs staff. We think something should happen, and it kind of does start a bit of a policy. Sometimes it's not as much in depth about what are other cities doing, because it's well within land development code or the city plan, and we have a lot of city staff that are well versed and they kind of already know what's going on in other communities. They're trained and they're accredited. So, but they direct city staff, and boom, and it is a policy arm. It is a policy process that starts, and private applicants can apply and go to this plan board with stuff they want. Now, that is usually just in land use, right? It's not deeper in policies that are, skateboarding in parks. But so there are those places where we do start a policy process. And so, of course we can start a policy process, but we don't have that as well laid out in the past. But as the mayor said, this is how it was done in the past, at some point in the further past. And this is what we do. We bring up an idea. But I did like having a policy arm, because they would do a little bit of the feeling out what other cities are doing, where it might fit into what other cities, particularly that. I really like that, bring forth, this is the way they do it in this city, this city, this city, and dig into a little bit of the processes of, this is why they did it in this city. This is the conversation happening in this city, as opposed to Commissioner Eastman having to dig in and find out in 1981 it was passed this way or whatever, or to find out that in Orlando it was 1988, and then in 1997 they had more conversations about it. And so I would like that. I would love for it to be in the budget. It's not there yet. But also we can't be afraid to say, this is what we want, and, and then instruct staff to, start working with it. If they have questions like, oh, who should be doing this? Is it over here? Is it Parks and Rec? Is it the attorney that needs to be brought in? Usually, if it's an ordinance, the attorney gets brought in anyways. So I'd like to go back to that, because it was useful, and it's still useful because some of those things are on paper. There's one about sidewalks I want to revisit, but largely budgetary because it'll cost extra money. So I have not gone back on that, on the sidewalk one. There's a bit of a study or a presentation about sidewalks. So, but yeah, like Commissioner Eastman's bringing forward some of these are not highly money, but as the mayor said, like when we get our head above water, there are some things that are coming back, and some of it we actually have those little policy papers on, so that's exciting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilson. And I will tell you that in the pre-policy department days, myself and one or two other commissioners, like Commissioner Santos, used to drive staff crazy with I have an idea. Will you work on this for me, please? And that's why policy was created. The policy department was created in the first place, because we were working the heck out of staff to help develop policy policy ideas to bring back. And a couple of city managers in a row were begging and pleading with us to find a different way to do it, so the people who already had 50-hour-a-week jobs didn't have to add that onto it as well. So just this background. Commissioner Book.
Yeah, thanks. So we've already talked about, as we get into the new fiscal year, the first budget amendment has got a couple of things, and we're already kind of lining up things that we're going to need to see what's happening with the new interim city manager. And one of them is that auditor money that may be available to us to make sure we're tight fiscally. Two of them is these.
Go right ahead.
Want me to finish, right?
Yeah, I do want you to.
Okay. 31 vacant positions, and if those are, some of those potentially have the opportunity to unfreeze in there, and now we kind of got this this position of policy, which would be important, but there'll be different priorities as we come to see what does that budget look like as we enter the first quarter, second quarter, and probably 1 through 3 amendments that'll coming from a policy process perspective. I think we do have policies in place already. Doesn't mean that we don't need more. That's why we have almost 30 advisory and some, not just advisory boards, but we have some boards that are decision-making boards, and we have to use them. These are folks who want to serve, they want work, they want to go out and get community input and help us do our jobs, because they're doing a job in a very confined space with expertise in a confined space. So I think we use those. We use our notification processes. We have, when it talks about getting process, well, we have 1,000 staff in the city, and all of them have expertise. And when they bring things forward up their chain of command or up to people they report to, we need to listen to them, and that's process. I'm much less interested for myself in, pushing any policy or agenda unless I see that it's coming from community or staff. And see what that might be, because if it comes from them, then I know that it's really asking me to try and work on a policy decision that's come elsewhere. Even though if I got out my bag of ideas that is in my office, we'd be here for the next 10 days. We'd never be able to sleep, because we all have different things that we're interested in. So I do think we have some policy process that are in place. We may not use them to full capacity, and we have a tremendous amount of staff who all see it day in and day out. Our frontline workers, and they can see what needs improvement. And as long as they feel that they have the capability to say honestly and candidly to their supervisors, that's how we get our best ideas, because they know how it's operating. So those are just some of my thoughts on policy.
Thank you, Commissioner Book. Commissioner Engel.
I will say it has been kind of an adventure for me coming in, trying to figure out exactly how to get ideas moving and pushed on and all that stuff. I will say the process that Commissioner Eastman used today, I'm a little concerned about. It's because it would require me to make PowerPoints, and I'm not a big fan of that plan. But in general, I think part of it is that we're elected officials, and we've got a lot of leeway on how it is we decide to approach things. And with a lot of leeway, you get some slop in there. But I think I'm still trying to figure out exactly what all these buttons and levers do. But but having a little clearer policy on exactly the best way to move some of that forward might be helpful and stuff. And I can see where policy department would be super helpful if we could afford one. That's all I got.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Engel. And again, we're not, I don't think anybody expects to be able to fund such a thing anytime real soon. But we do need to keep our eye on it as something that is a priority, because it keeps us in a process. It gives us a way to move things through a pipeline, and it worked. I mean, it was way better than the Wild West that we had prior to that. But there is no limit of ideas that people bring to me from the community about things that could be changed, and things that work different ways in other cities. And I'm sure that is true of all of you. And people get really frustrated that there's not a good way to move some of that stuff forward, because they get tired of me saying, well, we're in a budget crisis. We've got this breathing down our neck. We got this thing going on. Give us some room before we do that. Sooner or later, folks want us to actually move beyond the crisis and start working on how do we make our city a better place to live. And one of the ways of doing that is by folks feeling engaged, like they can talk to us and understand how a bill becomes a law, so to speak. And that's a thing that I like about Gainesville, is that people do want to engage in how we can make the laboratory of democracy a thing, and creating ways to let that flow through without bogging down people who, again, have very demanding jobs already, so that we have an opportunity to think about it and work through the details is a useful thing. And I would say more than half the stuff that came through the policy committee never actually, probably 2/3 of it, never became an ordinance. But because we were able to work through why it was a bad idea. I tell people all the time, I mostly have bad ideas, but I'm going to keep coming up with ideas and having smart people help me work through those and say, here's why. Pat me on the head and say, I appreciate your good little idea, but it's not really a good idea. That's important and useful to me. And I think as a policymaker, having that control over it, that faucet you can turn to say, this is good, but not good enough to be a law, and have the opportunity to really work through it is extremely useful. And it saves existing staff, a whole lot of work in the meantime. So, all that said, I don't see any other lights.
I do have one other.
Okay, go ahead. Yep. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm hopeful this is not a lengthy discussion. This was just a primary 2 concrete questions related to Thelma Bolton. I'm totally comfortable with my vote and what we've done in that regard. There was just a question posed that I was hopeful to get an answer with is there in fact a 90-day demolition abeyance for that particular property? In other words, I just needed that from a policy and ordinance perspective, because we're getting emails that says we're violating our own ordinance, and I can't imagine that would be the case.
Mr. Persons is at the podium and he can respond, but the commission took action last week and we were asked to move forward, making sure that we were in adherence of any safety issues and any administrative, policies that needed to be adhered to before we move forward with the demolition, and that is where we're headed. And unless there is an action by this commission that overturns what happened last Thursday, we are proceeding with all due diligence to demo Thelma Bolton.
Within our own policies and laws.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And again, just to reiterate, this is a dangerous building, so it is not subject to the 90-day delay. That is typically reserved for properties that are outside of any historic district that happen to meet the age requirements in the city's building section of the code. So it is not applicable. And I believe the demolition permit is either already been issued or it is should be issued before the end of today.
Yeah, that's the key. I just want to be able to answer that question accurately, and that's way beyond my depth is. We're not in violation of our own protocol. That has nothing to do with our vote. If the demolition proceeds, it proceeds. Do we know what? So due diligence means what? as it relates to timeframe.
Mr. Mayor, we, I believe, are meeting, if we have not already met with the city's demolition contractor as well as the scaffolding contractor. I believe, I don't know if Mr. Singleton has a update, but I believe demolition is imminent, starting potentially as early next week.
Andrew, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Mayor, if I might be allowed to speak with Andrew here, have we also received a go-ahead from the Historic Preservation Office?
Yes, they're part of that permit
Just making
review,
sure.
and that's correct, yep.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an important thing that I was not aware of, is that so historic preservation has a role to play in this, and they've played it. Okay, all right. Mr. Singleton, did you have anything to add? Or?
Demo permit has been issued, and we're proceeding with demolition early next week, very early next week.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Singleton. Did you have anything else, Commissioner Book? Okay, all right, thank you. Commissioner Willits.
Mr. Mayor, and I just, on this topic, I just wanted to make sure that it gets set out to all of us. Some county commissioners had suggested that this was kind of out of the blue for them, at least what I reported in an email or a news article. But our staff, Thomas Harrington, did email county administrative leadership the day before to say, hey, a couple of things that are going to be on our agenda that are of county, interest, and it did include Thelma Bolton. So at that point, our agenda was printed, and our agenda did have, and backup did have a recommendation from staff, and so it was, the county commission could have known at least. It wasn't like it was completely silent between city staff and county staff. I just wanted to make sure to bring that up, because when I first read the news article, I was like, that seems odd that it would be that much of a surprise, at least, But county administrative staff had been notified that we were going to talk specifically about that, about Thelma Bolton. So I just wanted to mention that. I don't know, Madam Manager, if you have anything to add to that.
No, just for the commission's information. The city commission agendas are always shared with I won't say the agendas are shared, but when there are major topics on our agenda that we believe the county would be interested in, Mr. Harrington always sends an email to the manager and all of the other staff over at the county saying these are items that will be on our commission agenda if you're interested. And on 9/3, September 3rd, that email was sent to the county commission. Their meeting, I believe, was on 9/4.
Our meeting was 9/4, and then theirs was.
Yes, so they got the email from Mr. Harrington letting them know that Thelma Bolton would be discussed at our meeting on that particular day. So, and that happens for all of our meetings.
That's good information. I wasn't aware of that. Thank you. Okay. I feel obliged to point out that nobody takes any pleasure in not having Thelma Bolton available to us anymore. But that is the condition of the building and the financial realities of it going forward. So I see no other lights. I do want to thank city manager staff for the excellent preparation that went into this morning's commemoration of the 9/11 24th sad anniversary this morning. It was as always, a moving experience. And I appreciate all of the tremendous effort that went into planning that on the part of our city staff. And seeing no other lights, I will call this meeting adjourned.